Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast. Before we get started, I did want to mention that we have our weekly newsletter that's going out every single month where it goes over a recap of all of the episodes that we've launched, as well as any important news about what Jamie and I are doing. And we'd love for you to stay up to date with everything that's going on flipping the barrel. So www.flippingthebarrel.com, and that's where you can go in, put your email. We're not going to be sending you millions of emails. It's really just once every month, so they stay up to date with us. And don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes as well as on our website. And please feel free to always send us a message or an email if you have anything or any advice or recommendations of different people that you would like for us to interview. We're always open to hear from you guys. So let's get into today's episode. We have Laura Benavidez. She's the Director of Sustainability at Integrity Biochem and the Vice President of Technology at Integrity Mining and Industrial. She's graduated from University of Texas at Austin with a biochemistry degree, and she's passionate about sustainability. She's a new mom, and we can't wait to hear more about her story. So hi, Laura. Thank you for being here today.
Hi, thanks guys for having me.
I feel like we've been trying to connect on this for so long, Laura. So we're excited to finally get you on, and you came highly recommended. So we're really excited to get into your story. And I really think what's important, again, is to note that we have another leader in the space whose parents actually came from, Colombia. So they immigrated here to the US and they resided in Texas, and that's where you grew up. And I think it's really interesting because a lot of people who we have on the podcast, especially those who are in successful positions like yourself, they're some of the first generations of families that go to college and that really pursue, a career. So talk to us a little bit about, your life growing up and also, kind of what it was like in an immigrant family and, having that opportunity here in Texas.
Yes, so thank you again. I'm very excited to be on here, excited to finally sit down with you guys. So I actually grew up in Houston, Texas, and my mom is from Colombia. So I grew up to a single mother, and she had a lot of support from her dad, my grandfather, because my grandma actually died when I was 3. So it was a kind of like, how they say it takes a village. So my village was my mom, my grandpa, and my aunts. They all kind of huddled together since they were new to the country in the 80s. And I was born in 88. So they were very when they were in Colombia, my grandma always used to say she was going to have American grandchildren. And my grandpa would just laugh at her because, they had a business there and there was never any vision of coming here. But somehow the stars aligned and they decided to move here and basically start from scratch. Because she just really had that dream and that vision and, the American dream in general. But when they came here, starting from scratch is actually a lot harder, as everybody knows. And so it took a lot. And at the beginning, my mom being single, she did everything she could for me, which at the beginning was working 2 and 3 jobs to make sure we were taken care of. But as I grew and as she grew, she actually went to community college, got her degree, learned English, and wanted to be an example for me of not only hard work, but also education and what that could do. And always encouraged me to, above all, study and above all, make something of myself. So yes, as you mentioned, I was first generation of college, and all of my cousins after me have been doing that as well. So I would say that we did live up to my grandmother's dream of coming here. And growing up in Houston in general was very interesting to me, because this is an oil-rich city, and that's something that you always heard. I actually didn't think that I would end up in this industry, but my job brought me back to the same city. So growing up and then going to UT, I was applying to jobs. As you guys know, once you're in college, you kind of apply to every job that you can. And I didn't really know that I would end up in Houston again, but it's a really good homage to my family and my ancestors and my grandpa, who actually would work nights as at ConocoPhillips doing different assistant type things. To now have a granddaughter who's actually coming up in the same industry is pretty crazy.
Thank you for sharing your background. I think it's really remarkable what your mother has done. And we love hearing those kind of stories because, both Jamie and I also grew up, single parents, and very similar to you, like the immigrant life is really hard when you first come, and really like your parents or your mom is the one that took everything upon herself to make sure that you had a better future. And, sometimes it's a hit or miss. Sometimes, that second generation doesn't do anything with all the opportunities that they're handed. But you, on the other hand, really like ran with it. And you were like, I can live the American dream. Like, look at you, you're VP of like two different companies all under one, but still like you've done so well for yourself, and your mom must be super proud. But not only that is that she also excelled and like decided like, okay, I can also go back to school, learn English, and do way more, not just like I'll come here and like keep a minimum wage job and then my daughter can go ahead. She also like leveled up, so that's a lot to do. So you graduated university with a biochemistry degree.
Yes.
And what was your goal to do afterwards? Like you mentioned not necessarily going into oil and gas. So what was your first job?
So, being from immigrant families, they're like, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. And that's pretty much what I thought the options were. I didn't know about a lot of different career options out there. So I wanted to be a doctor, and I went to college and I was pre-med. So for me, that was a biochemistry degree based on my interests in high school and stuff. And as I continued with my education, by junior year, I kind of knew that I didn't want to do 4 more years of school. But at that point, I was like, well, what am I going to do? I have no idea what's out there. So I thought, I have to get some sort of industry job. And for a biochemist who's not going to get her PhD, a lot of times that can look like lab and just a lab tech doing repetitive work, which I never really was interested in. So luckily that there was a info session at Halliburton, at UT by Halliburton. Dr. Charlie Landis, who is currently the chief technology officer of our current company, but actually was my first boss back then, was doing the info session. And he made it sound like, we were actually going to be doing some very high level research and development, and it was not going to be repetitive work. I got hired on the industrial division of Halliburton called HIPS. And so what that was basically any drilling that was non-oil field. So every day truly was different. We were doing gas pipelines, construction work, mining. And then I was able to actually go on field trials and do things like that. So I'm very happy with the way things turned out, because this is not a career that I even knew existed. And actually, from where I am today, I've had a very crazy trajectory of kind of how things have gone. And that's actually something I'd like to say is you never really know where your first job is going to take you. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing into that first position. And I'm glad I did that.
I just love hearing the stories of those info sessions at universities and how those get people involved in our industry. It's really amazing what you have done. And I know you spent some time at Halliburton, working your way up in different, technology aspects. And you did, some emphasis, I believe, in mining as well. What did you see as like the biggest difference between, working at Halliburton and then when in 2017, when you were offered the job with Biochem from your former boss that, you actually were just speaking about, that introduced you to the industry at UT? You left a large corporation with a stable job that, you knew what was, obviously Halliburton was going to be around for God knows how long. Right. And then you hear about this startup, and taking that risk. What made you do that transition, and what did you learn, going from, a pure oil and gas place to also working in on the mining side of the business?
Yeah, so that's funny, because when I started at Halliburton, I was like, wow, I got this crazy job I never knew existed. And when you work here for 40 years, you get a Rolex. So I guess I'll be here. Like, that's so cool. And I never really thought about how the career was going to go. But the first thing Charlie always told me was, okay, you're going to be in the lab for 2 years, and then you're going to find your interest and what really speaks to you. And hopefully by 5 years, you're going to make a really big career choice. And surprisingly, he was right on target because after 2 years, I was offered a expat assignment. So I actually went to the Netherlands to be the lab manager there for a company called Sibo Holland that was a joint venture between Halliburton and Imerys. So what I really always loved in my first 2 years was doing field trials and interacting with customers. And then even though I was the lab manager at Sibo, I still was invited to field trials because they knew, I was still young. I wanted to learn, and they were introducing me to industries we don't really have in America, like tunneling and large things like that that are very common in Europe. So I was doing customer trainings, site visits, and I really felt like that was my niche. I really loved that. So when I moved back to the US, I believe it was late 2015, I was now the field rep for Latin America. But then in 2016 was a big downturn, so everyone was being laid off, travel was halted, and it just wasn't the position that I had envisioned, although it was nobody's fault. So at that time, Charlie reached out to me and said, hey, we have this startup and it's biopolymer technology, very new, very interesting. We want you to do sales. We think you have this niche on the mining and industrial side that we're missing because it was a bunch of oil field guys at the time. And so I said, well, this could not be a scarier time to leave because it is a downturn, but obviously I'm an expat. I don't think Halliburton's going to lay me off. So I'm literally leaving job security to join a startup with zero security and also doing sales, which is something that I never really had to do because that one sales job at Halliburton, travel was halted. So I just, after a lot of literal tears, talking to my mom and my boyfriend, I just decided to go for it. And it has been the best decision that I could have made because this biopolymer technology was very unique. We ended up forming Integrity Biochem. So I got to come in on the ground floor, something that you can't do at an established company. So there's a lot of learning that just happens. You have to learn how to input orders and do customer service, even though you don't do that. And I actually, with my lab experience, ordered lab equipment and cabinets and desks to build the lab that we have in Crescent, Texas, and just did a lot of things that we all had to do back then to get the company up and running. And I think that's the biggest and fastest learning curve that I've ever had to do. And then going through that, I discovered that, yes, my job role is sales, but what I still love that has been consistent is training and customer presentations. And so because I had such a good relationship with the management and this team that we have grown with, they said, yeah, we agree those are your skills and we want you to be the VP of technology for mining in 2019. That's headed up by Will Gibbs. And now I get to still focus on what I really love and still grow the company. So now I'm growing the mining side with Will and our team there. And this new role of sustainability kind of came up because that's something that happens on startups. There's really no one trajectory. It's just oh, we have a biopolymer. Sustainability is the hot topic right now. You have a biochem degree and you care about the environment. You're a millennial. This is perfect. Let's grow our ESG division. So culture and things like that have always been really important to me as well. Diversity. I was in the Women of Bayreuth, all that stuff. So now I feel like that's another really good group to grow in. And it's just more growth that I think I could have only gotten at a size that we have right now.
What I think is amazing is, for one, you took on so much at once. You went and you changed roles within a company. You went to a smaller company. You then, you even created lab and, you made it sound so seamless, but I know there had to have been some challenges. During that process, what was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
It's definitely challenging. And yeah, I know when I say it like that, it sounds very easy. And my mom always says that I put myself down because I'm like, no, it's not really impressive.
No, you like built a company from the ground up at a really young age. This was like an MBA on steroids.
I think that one of the biggest challenges is imposter syndrome for me. Like, oh, this just kind of fell into my lap. Let's make it work. And I think that that's a challenge that's facing a lot of women. And just having the confidence that you belong there, because I was starting this company with literal like legends in the space, Charlie Landis, Jimmy Jett, Bryce Parker, and there's too many to name, but every time you talk about these people, they're very well known. They're a lot older than me and they're men. And so I am coming in as a young woman with really not a huge Rolodex and a lot of experience. And it's still very hard for me to believe like that I am making a difference and that I am part of it. And it's not just luck. And I honestly struggle with that pretty much every day. And so I think that aside from actual challenges, like on the business side, Jamie, which might be what you're asking, a lot of it is also emotional that I hope women can start changing, because I think that a lot of that happens to us, which is maybe why it's seen as such a big movement to kind of get women CEOs and things like that, because we're not really advocating for ourselves and we're not really taking credit where we probably should, which is why I love your podcast.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think a lot of people have talked about imposter syndrome. It's very real. It's actually a very important topic to talk about. So it's really great that you mentioned that, because I think sometimes we all think like we're the only ones that have that, but I would assure you like the majority of us are like, how did we get here? And I do see a lot of women in particular claiming whatever success they have had for their team, saying like, well, my team helped me get here, or luck. Like I just fell in at the right time and it was the right timing. And when in reality, like there's a reason why he called you out of like all the people at Halliburton that he probably worked with, like you stood out. So it's really good that you mentioned that, because it's definitely something that we all struggle with, especially as women. And like you mentioned, all of these big names, they were a lot older than you, and you're coming in here of like, well, this, like, I don't really belong here, but I'm just going to like enjoy the ride. But obviously over the last few years, like you've become director of sustainability and VP of technology. And I'm sure they wouldn't have just given you these titles if you didn't, earn them. So talk to us a little bit about motherhood. You're, like I mentioned in the beginning, you're a new mom. How has that dynamic been with like your first baby, working in still a small company where you wear multiple hats? What did that look like?
Yeah, so one of the challenges I would say that has been, the time we're in, COVID, the pandemic, and also just like the type of lifestyle I had. So before having Luke, my son, who's 20 months, I used to travel all the time. Like I live in Houston, but our headquarters is in Crescent. So when we were first starting up in 2017, I practically lived there. Like I would go Monday through Thursday and just be home on weekends. Then as we grew, we started the mining division, and then I was probably traveling like every other week in 2019. Once COVID hit in 2020 is pretty much when I discovered that I was pregnant. So it was kind of lucky in that sense that, okay, now the whole world shut down, we're not going to travel and you're pregnant. So I was able to kind of stay home and have a very relaxed pregnancy while still working, had a lot of support from the team because they never stopped. So the people that I work with were still traveling pretty much starting in April again of 2020, but nobody knew the risks at the time and was like, you're pregnant, you should stay home. So I really was grateful for that support. But as the world started opening up in 2021 again, I was now kind of very hard on myself whether I should get back on the road. So it took a lot of soul searching, speaking to my managers and the team, and discovering, I kind of want to travel less. And what is that going to look like for my career? Because I really love site visits and training customers. So thankfully, with the world we're in now, Zoom and these things are a little bit more acceptable. But with the industries that we're in, a handshake is still a lot more valuable.
Yeah.
And so it's taken a lot of balance. My husband's PTO is sometimes used to take care of Luke while I'm on a 3-day trip. Or my mom works from home, but she, obviously I value her career as well. So we try to tag team it if I have something going on. The grandparents on my husband's side. So it just takes a lot of effort and a lot more shuffling than it did before. And it's also a situation where, you never want to look back and wish that you were in town and didn't miss certain things. And that's something where I think, sadly, it does affect more women, because I don't hear a man saying, oh, I'm going to have a baby soon. Like, should I travel less, or what's going to happen? So I think that that's just something that I'm still struggling with.
And I think that's a great topic too, because, Massiel and I talk about this all the time. And, one of the biggest things that we focus on as new moms is priority of making sure that whatever event, conference, or whatever time we're going to be spending away from our children, like, it makes sense for us to spend that time away. And I just think as women, we're just more cognizant of that, other than, I think, men are just developed differently, where I don't feel like it ever, like, they don't think like I need to be home to put my daughter to bed. Like, I don't really know if that like correlates.
And I'm not saying that they don't care. Like, I definitely know that the men that I work with are so supportive, and they say, like, make sure you're putting your family first, birthdays, big games for their sons or daughters, rehearsals, things, they want to be there for that. But like you said, for me, it's more like bonding time and things like that.
It's a personal thing. Like, and I think Massiel and I would both agree with you that outside, like work wise, they fully support whatever you need, but it's still in your mind, you're like, well, I should probably be there, but yet I want to be here too.
Yes.
And so it's really a balancing act. And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I do know, I don't have the answer, but I do know that there is like ways where, you just make sense of, okay, this is worth my time. I'm going to go stay the night here. And then other times it's not, like, you fly there, you fly back, and that's how you get it done.
And I think it's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves too, because they're not asking me to be at every single meeting. And so every time I've said, hey, I think I need to stay home this week, it's totally fine. But it's my own ambition, I guess, that's like, well, we've all worked really hard to get this customer. We really need to be giving an in-person presentation. Or, oh, well, this is a very important field trial. As the VP, I need to be there, that kind of stuff, where I'm sure if I didn't want to be there, it would be fine. But it's a lot of self-made pressure as well.
No, and I think, as we grow too, and as mothers, I think also, those types of circumstances, we learn how to work around them. I mean, 20 months in, you're still relatively really new. And I'm 15 months, and Massiel's baby, I think, just turned 9 months. So, it's definitely a balancing act. But, for our last question, we really wanted to ask you, majority of your career has been focused around product management, development, technology. You have been really hands-on, kind of like you were just talking about with customer presentations and going to the field. And then, taking on this new role as director of sustainability, how has that changed your perspective on Biochem and how it does business, and like the impact that you have in the industry?
Well, I think that Integrity Biochem has been a pioneer in this space without really even knowing it or marketing it. So when we started the company, we were basing it all off this biopolymer technology for clay control. And ever since then, it has expanded into surfactants, non-emulsifiers, and flow aids, and a lot bigger market of just bio-based ingredients. And so we were just doing that because obviously it was really good technology, and it wasn't the type of product that, oh, just because it's green, we're introducing it. It was green, and it also worked as well or better than the competition. And so now we're seeing, our competitors, and just clients and suppliers going out there and marketing different things. And we're like, hey, you know, our product has always been like that. We should be positioning ourselves in the space for something that we were pioneers on. And so I think that it's just a really timely effort. We've started calculating the emissions at our plant. And so for me, that's all new. I've been more involved on the product side of things. So being more involved with operations and having to speak to the plant guys and the customer service team, procurement, all that for sustainable procurement, getting involved with our suppliers green and kind of everything that people need to look at on that side of the business is new to me. But I also really do enjoy speaking to the groups that I would probably only see at like a yearly meeting. So.
I know I really love how you close that with, you know, y'all had always been in this space. You're always been, you know, promoting this without having to promote it. And I think it's amazing that, you know, y'all were pioneers and now you can actually just use that too as an initiative to show, hey, we've always been green and that's always been how we have done business. So, you know, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And just, it's amazing to see what you have done and accomplished at such a young age. And we're just really excited that we finally got to cover, you know, the great things that you've been doing.
Thank you so much, Laura. And the takeaway, I think, from the podcast is that take risks early on in your career and your trajectory, you just never know how it's going to go. So just hop in for the ride. And who knows if you would have said no to Charlie or you would have said no to going to a Halliburton company, like where would you be? But seems like you said the stars aligned and a lot of your hard work has gone behind it to get to where you are today. But I love that. So take risks, guys. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Thanks, Laura.